Hi, this is Peak from Novation, and it just got a pretty big firmware update to version 1.2. In this video I'll go over Peak briefly in case you're not familiar with it, and then go over some patch ideas with all the big new features. Peak is an 8-voice hybrid synth with digital FPGA-based oscillators and an analog filter, drive, and distortion, along with digital effects. Each of the 8 voices has 3 oscillators that can be independently either one of 4 core shapes or one of originally 17 and now 60 different wavetables. The oscillators are digital, but they're powered by an extremely high-resolution processor. They sound good and they survive extreme modulation. The 3 oscillators get fed into a mixer, which includes a noise generator and ring modulation for oscillators 1 and 2, and then into a multi-mode filter with pre- and post-filter drive, and then finally into the effects section with 4 effects: distortion, chorus, delay, and reverb. Onboard modulation includes 2 LFOs, now expanded to 4, an amp envelope, and 2 additional assignable mod envelopes, as well as 2 animate buttons which can make either momentary changes to your sound or you can latch them to make permanent changes. There's also a built-in arpeggiator with over 30 patterns and glide control, and you have access to additional features using the main screen with various additional parameter pages for the oscillators, envelopes, LFOs, and so on. Among other, this screen gives you access to a 16-slot mod matrix, and there are quite a few modulations you can make without the mod matrix, for example, shaping the pitch, the shape amount, or the filter. Peak also has a few nice frequency modulation features, both into the filter and using the mod matrix into the various oscillators from one to the other, or from the noise source to one of the oscillators. Peak can store 512 presets, and it comes with 256 presets to get you started. So that's Peak as it was before update 1.2. Let's take a look at what's new. The first major improvement is that Peak comes with over 40 new wavetables. I won't go through them all, but here's just a taste of a few of the new ones. Each wavetable has 5 core shapes, and you can morph between those shapes either manually or set it as a modulation destination. Let's try another one. This one's nice. Let's see, this one. Very interesting as well. Some of these are a bit buzzy, but add a little reverb to them and they start to shine. Again, I won't go through all of them, but let's just sample a bit more. The patch in the intro to this video, as well as most of the patches I'll show here, use the new wavetables. An example of a preset idea using wavetables is this. What's going on here is there's a square LFO that creates a rhythmic beat by closing and opening the envelope, and LFO2 is a sawtooth LFO that cycles through the wavetable. Both LFOs are tempo synced, and I picked the sunrise wavetable, but you can obviously cycle between any wavetable you like. And this is polyphonic, so you could play chords as well. The nice thing about this preset, and I think wavetables in general, is that you can get so much going on harmonically without even using the filter. So the filter is wide open in this preset. You can then go on and do whatever you wanted with it. But it's not necessary. It does quite a lot on its own. And I haven't even used the two other oscillators, so there's quite a lot of sound shaping to be done here yet. One more thing about Peak: if either one of the animate buttons is lit, it means that it can be used to create changes to the preset based on how it was defined, and that these buttons can be held as well. And of course, modulations can be brought in gradually as well with, for example, the mod wheel. While we're on the topic of modulation, a major improvement has been done to the mod matrix. Before this update, you had to pick a destination on one page and then move to another page to pick the sources. The way that it's organized right now, there's just a page per slot for each of the 16 slots. So you can see everything on one page, both sources, the destination that you're going for, as well as the mod depth, and this can be either positive or negative. So this mod matrix layout is a big improvement in Peak 1.2. The next big update in Peak 102 is that the effect parameters have been added as modulation destinations, and they got their own mod matrix with 4 slots. You page down the effects pages, and eventually you'll get to slots 1, 2, 3, and 4. This mod matrix has about 12 sources, I think, as well as 12 destinations. I created a few presets with the effects parameters as modulation destinations. The first is called Bend Chorus Feedback, so it doesn't take much to guess what this does and how. Quite interesting things can happen when you start messing around with effects parameters. This next one is called Reverb High Pass Filter Monster. So if I go into the effects mod matrix and disable this for just 1 second, you'll see that the reverb in Peak is really very nice and charming. Nice, smooth. But if I start rapidly modulating the high pass filter parameter of the reverb, it starts to get pretty creepy. So what Aftertouch Twang does is take the keyboard's aftertouch and directs it to the delay's time parameter. And because in this preset feedback has been set all the way up, this can do anything from light touches causing this kind of mangling to the sound, as well as quick twangs. Twang and the approach to it also change as you mess around with oscillator shapes. By the way, in this preset, I changed the default routing of the effects. So by default, the routing is parallel, which means anything you play gets sent to all 3 effects, but the output of the effects themselves gets sent directly out. So the twang is quite different because it doesn't get sent into the reverb. By changing the routing to any one of the routings that send the delay into the reverb, you get that effect where the delay is fed into the reverb. The next new feature in Peak 1.2 is that 2 more LFOs have been added. So you get access to LFOs 1 and 2 through the console here with additional parameters in the menus. And if you click next until you get to LFOs 3 and 4, you'll see that each of them has one dedicated page, one for LFO 4 and one for LFO 3. One of the reasons that LFOs 3 and 4 have fewer configurable parameters is that they can't be synced to keyboard events. They have the same 4 shapes as LFOs 1 and 2, and they can be either free running based on this rate here, or if you use this parameter, they can be synced to your tempo. But they don't have some of the parameters like repeats or slew as LFOs 1 and 2. The advantage that LFOs 3 and 4 have over 1 and 2 is that they can be assigned as sources for the effects parameters. So let's just look at one preset, for example, that I created that uses 3 LFOs. In this preset, I'm using a combination of LFOs 1 and 2 to modulate the level of oscillator 3, and then I'm using LFO 3 to modulate its shape. In this preset, for example, LFO 1 is randomly choosing wavetable positions for oscillator 1. LFO 2 is creating this baseline using a square wave LFO, and it's doing it at different intervals from LFO 1 to make it interesting. And then LFO 3 is slowly changing the frequency of the high-pass filter in this case. Another new and interesting feature in firmware 1.2 is the ability to loop envelopes. So envelopes typically are a one-time thing. They don't loop. So for example, in this preset, this little dong is a modulation with this mod envelope. And like typical envelopes, it happens just once. But if I turn on repeats, and this can go on to any number you want, or just keep it repeating. It can create quite interesting sounds, and these attack and decay parameters are modulatable destinations in the mod matrix. While we're on the topic of envelopes, a new optional hold time was added between the attack and decay parameters. So in this preset, I'm using the attack and decay parameters to modulate the resonance and sort of create like an arpeggiator using the harmonics of the sound. Now, as attack and decay typically function, they go up and then go down. But you can introduce a hold time of up to 500 milliseconds, all the way at 127, in which case it'll go up and then wait up to half a second. So this is just one use for the hold function, and obviously there are endless other options for this. And by the way, if you're like me and we're hoping they'd introduce a delay stage before the attack, you can sort of get that effect by turning on the gate in option on either LFO 1 and 2 and setting them to either repeat or not, which effectively turns them into envelopes. So you just go to the repeat parameter and choose the number of repeats you want, and then choose the gate option instead of fading in or fading out, and then you can set the gate time using the fade time knobs. And then if you choose the right shape, you can sort of get a delayed type of effect. Again, it's not perfect, but sometimes it does the trick. Another new feature in Peak version 1.2 is the ability to define micro-tuning tables, and there are 16 of these tables that you can choose from. And once you set the oscillator to the tuning table you want, you can start messing around with the tuning of each and every one of the notes and get interesting scales. One more noteworthy new feature in version 1.2, typically when you press the initialize button, you get the default preset where all the knobs are set to a certain number, which doesn't reflect their actual position. If you want, you can choose to turn on live mode, and then when you press initialize, you get the knobs as they were, and their position reflects where the parameters actually are. Another thing that I think is noteworthy, now this isn't made by Novation, this is software called MIDIsynth Peak. It's made by a third-party company called Sigabort, and it too has been updated to support Peak 1.2. Now this software isn't free, but it comes with a free trial, which I think is a great way to get another angle at what's going on inside Peak. Even though peak is very much knob per function, there still are quite a few parameters that don't have a dedicated knob, like overall dry and wet levels for the effects, or the post-drive parameter for the filter, or the VSync parameter. This software automatically maps to peak, so every knob turn on peak will cause the similar parameter to change on the software, and it goes the other way around. Change a parameter on screen, and it will change in peak as well. It can also be used inside a DAW to automate peak parameters, and has a few extra nifty features like morphing presets and macros. So morphing will take one preset and slowly morph it into another. So you can sort of play with that. There's also a randomize function, and it supports mappable macros too. Peak also comes with 50 new presets, and if you want to download the presets used in this video, I'll be making a pack of 20 presets available to anyone who supports this channel on Patreon. And while you're there, consider upgrading to the Wave Shaper tier, which includes my continuously updated book of electronic music ideas, tips, and tricks, which will include patch ideas used here as well as a few more. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll be making at least one more little tips and tricks video about Peak, so consider subscribing, or if you're from the future, check the channel, hit like if this video was useful, and thanks very much for watching.